The silence in the house was deafening, a physical weight pressing down on me, a suffocating blanket woven from unspoken words and the absence of warmth. It wasn't a sudden explosion of anger, but a chilling, meticulous dissection. They'd packed my things, or what they deemed worthy of packing, into a few scuffed cardboard boxes, their contents a meager testament to years of shared existence. These boxes, unceremoniously shoved aside, were left by the curb, a silent declaration of my severance. My keys, the very symbols of access and belonging, my wallet, my phone, the conduits to the outside world and my own identity. All gone, vanished into the ether of their control. They stood in the doorway, a formidable barrier between me and the life I had known, their faces carefully blank, impassive masks that betrayed nothing. They were like sculptors skilled in their craft, chipping away at something they no longer recognized or perhaps chose not to. That was the last I saw of them, the last I heard, a final sterile echo, until the whispers began, insidious tendrils weaving their way through the fabric of my newfound solitude. It wasn't a sudden eviction, not precisely. The term felt too blunt, too abrupt for the intricate, drawn-out process that had led me to this precipice. It was a slow, calculated erosion, a masterful act of attrition. Years of subtle digs, of insinuation and veiled criticism, had chipped away at my sense of belonging, each one a tiny fissure in the foundation of my self-worth. I had become a guest in my own life, my presence tolerated, but never truly embraced. Every disagreement, no matter how minor, had morphed into a battle I was destined to lose, my perspective systematically undermined. Every suggestion I offered, every idea I dared to voice, was met with a dismissive wave, a polite but firm redirection. My contributions, my sacrifices, the countless hours of effort and unwavering support I had given, were quietly erased from the family ledger, as if they had never existed. They had built their future, their seemingly perfect edifice, on a foundation that included my past, a past they now deemed inconvenient, a relic to be discarded. And then, with a chilling finality, they had decided I was no longer a necessary component, an outdated fixture in their evolving blueprint. I had watched it happen day by day, a spectator to my own unmaking, feeling the ground beneath me crumble, each small betrayal a tremor that weakened the structure of my existence, until the final decisive shove. The locks were changed, the locks on my own door a stark, tangible symbol of my expulsion. I walked away with nothing but the clothes on my back and the bitter metallic taste of betrayal clinging to my tongue. For a while I simply existed. Survival was the primary objective, a raw, animal instinct that propelled me forward. I found a small, impersonal room, a temporary refuge that offered little solace. I worked menial jobs, the kind that blurred into an indistinguishable haze of physical exertion and mental disengagement. I nursed a wound that felt too deep to ever heal, a cavernous emptiness that threatened to consume me. I saw their social media posts, curated glimpses of their seemingly idyllic lives. Dinners filled with laughter, exotic vacations bathed in sunlight, milestones celebrated with triumphant fanfare. Each one was a fresh stab, a reminder of what had been taken, a magnification of my own desolation. They were thriving, or so it seemed, their lives unfolding in a vibrant tapestry of success and happiness, while I was a ghost, a phantom haunting the periphery of their perfect picture, unseen and unheard. But humans are remarkably resilient, their capacity for endurance, a testament to the indomitable spirit that resides within. Even when you strip them down to their bare essentials, leaving them with nothing but the raw mechanics of survival, something fundamental remains, an unyielding core of self-preservation and an intrinsic need to push back. It's not a violent uprising, not a roar of defiance, but a quiet insistence on truth, a subtle assertion of one's existence. The leftovers they'd left me with weren't merely the meager physical possessions they deemed surplus. They were memories, observations, a deep, almost visceral understanding of the hairline cracks in their polished facade, the subtle imperfections they so desperately tried to conceal. I knew their insecurities, the gnawing anxieties that lurked beneath their confident exteriors. I knew their petty jealousies, the simmering resentments that fueled their actions. I knew the carefully constructed narratives they had spun for themselves and for each other, intricate webs of self-deception designed to maintain their illusion of perfection. The turning point wasn't dramatic, no sudden cathartic outburst. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind that often blends into the background of existence, as I sat in my sterile room, the muted sunlight filtering through the grimy window. I watched a bird outside, a small industrious creature, meticulously building its nest, placing twig after twig with unwavering focus. It struck me then, a profound realization that resonated through the quiet of the room. They thought I was done. Finished. Incapable of anything but quiet suffering. A broken instrument rendered silent. And that's precisely why they wouldn't see it coming, why they were so utterly unprepared. My action wasn't a grand gesture, not a fiery rebellion. It was the slow, deliberate unfolding of facts, a quiet unfolding that mirrored the bird's patient construction. I started small with acquaintances, not the mutual friends who were inextricably linked to them, but people on the periphery, individuals who had heard bits and pieces of the story, fragments of gossip, but never the whole, unvarnished truth. I didn't gossip, didn't embellish, didn't seek to sow discord. I simply stated what had happened with a calm, almost detached tone, as if recounting a mundane event. Yes, they asked me to leave. I would say, my voice even devoid of any trace of anger or desperation. No, they didn't offer any explanation. I'd offer a small, sad smile, a shrug that conveyed a sense of weary resignation. It is what it is. The key, I had discovered, was the absence of overt emotion. Anger invites defensiveness, a wall erected to protect oneself. Sadness, while eliciting sympathy, can also lead to pity, a condescending sentiment that diminishes the recipient. Detachment, however, invites curiosity. It piques interest, it encourages questions, it suggests a deeper story waiting to be unearthed. Then, I moved to the more significant circles, the orbits they occupied with greater confidence. The occasions they couldn't avoid, the family gatherings that, for some inexplicable reason, still felt obligated to include me, albeit in a diminished, almost spectral capacity. I'd be invited, a token gesture, a concession to propriety, expected to sit in the corner, to fade into the wallpaper, a silent witness to their continued unity. But I started showing up. Not to participate in their fabricated harmony, but to observe, to absorb, and occasionally to speak. The first time at my niece's birthday party, a bright, boisterous affair that was meant to signify familial joy, my sister-in-law, the architect of my expulsion, the one who had orchestrated my departure with such chilling efficiency, approached me. She offered that practiced, saccharine smile, a mask of feigned pleasantness that never quite reached her eyes. "So glad you could make it," she chirped, her voice falsely sweet, her gaze flicking over my simple dress, my unadorned presence, a subtle assessment of my diminished status. I met her gaze, my own calm, my expression unreadable. "Thank you for the invitation," I replied, my voice even, betraying none of the turmoil churning beneath the surface. "It's interesting to see everyone." Later, as the conversation inevitably turned to the family's recent successes, my brother, the one who had signed the papers that essentially erased me from their lives, was holding court, basking in the admiration of his peers, extolling the virtues of his latest business deal. He was speaking of hard work and dedication, his voice resonating with self-importance. I waited for a lull in the self-congratulatory monologue, a momentary pause in the ebb and flow of their adulation. Then I softly interjected, my voice carrying just enough to be heard. "It's amazing what can be achieved when you have a stable home environment, isn't it? And a supportive foundation." I always believed that was key. The air in the room shifted, palpable, instantaneous. Faces turned, a collective pause in the merriment. My brother's confident smile faltered for a millisecond, a fleeting flicker of unease before snapping back into place, a little too tight, a little too forced. My sister-in-law's practiced smile vanished, replaced by a subtle tightening of her jaw. At another event, a holiday dinner, a quintessential representation of their fabricated unity, they were all there, a united front, a perfectly blended family unit, each member playing their assigned role. They had managed to convince themselves, and more importantly others, that I was the problem, the difficult one, the one who had simply disconnected, the one who had chosen estrangement. When my mother, her voice tinged with a rehearsed nostalgia, brought up a childhood memory, a story meticulously crafted to paint me as childish and irresponsible, a tale designed to reinforce their narrative, I waited until she'd finished, until the echoes of her words had settled. Then I said, my voice gentle, "That's a funny story. What I remember most about that summer, though, is how much time I spent looking after the younger ones while everyone else was so busy with their own projects." Again a flicker, a subtle tightening of lips. The carefully constructed narrative, the one they had so painstakingly maintained, was starting to fray, its threads unraveling under the quiet pressure of recalled truth. The consequences weren't a sudden implosion, no dramatic collapse of their carefully constructed world. They were a slow, insidious unraveling of their meticulously crafted image. People started to look at them differently, their perception subtly altered by the quiet assertions. The whispers I had heard about myself, the rumors and insinuations that had plagued my existence, began to echo back, but this time they were directed at them, their own carefully guarded reputations now under scrutiny. Questions were asked, not accusatory, not overtly confrontational, but probing, gentle inquiries that sought to understand. "I heard you and your brother had a falling out," a friend might venture, a concerned note in their voice. "Is everything all right with your family?" The casual observer might not notice the subtle shifts, the almost imperceptible changes in demeanor. But the people who knew me, who knew the reality of my contributions, the years of selfless devotion, the unwavering support I had provided, they began to connect the dots, to piece together the fragments of truth. My sister-in-law's constant, almost desperate, need to project an image of perfection, of unwavering familial harmony, became a liability. Every time she spoke of family unity, of unwavering support and unconditional love, the memory of my eviction, the stark reality of my being cast out, would surface in the minds of those who knew the underlying truth. My brother, who thrived on admiration for his business acumen, his perceived success, found himself on the defensive. His success, once a source of unquestioned pride and admiration, was now tinged with the unspoken question of how it was achieved, at what personal cost, at my expense. He started to avoid the more intimate family gatherings, the ones where his carefully constructed facade might be more easily challenged. My mother, who had always been the buffer, the peacemaker, found herself caught in the crossfire, an unwilling participant in their internal conflict. She'd receive concerned calls from friends, gentle inquiries about my well-being, about the situation that had unfolded. Her attempts to smooth things over, to deflect the questions, only served to highlight the underlying discord, the unspoken tension that permeated their family dynamic. Her conversations with me became strained, filled with pregnant pauses, with hurried apologies that felt hollow and insufficient. She was no longer a neutral party. She was implicated, her silence a form of complicity. It wasn't about revenge, not in the fiery, destructive sense of the word. It was about the quiet, undeniable truth. The reality was that they had built their lives on a foundation that included me, a foundation I had helped to strengthen and sustain. And then, when it suited their convenience, when my presence became an inconvenience, they had dismantled that foundation with ruthless efficiency, leaving me standing in the rubble, expecting me to disappear, to fade into the background of their lives. But people don't just disappear. And the echoes of injustice, the reverberations of being wronged, have a way of finding their way back, of resurfacing when least expected. They were left with the consequences of their own actions, not in a dramatic, explosive crash, but in the subtle shift of gazes, the hushed conversations that ceased when I entered a room, the growing awareness that the perfect family portrait they so carefully presented had a dark, unacknowledged shadow. And I, the one they had left with nothing, was no longer the ghost. I was simply the truth, inconvenient and undeniable, a quiet presence that refused to be erased.